Coogs House. All right, the big weekend is finally here. It's going to rekindle that old Southwest Conference rivalry with that school that has that Bryles guy, that Ann Richards lady. Let's think happier thoughts.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to stop by, please be sure to hit subscribe down below. That way we get the latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're finding us on YouTube, welcome back to the YouTube channel. It is so good to see you again. Remember to subscribe. We're doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers. Next one, 1750. We're up over 1670 last I saw. Please subscribe. Help us get there. Like, comment on the video so we know you're in the contest. If you are all Baylored out by the end of this episode, tell us what your favorite Disney movie is. Now, today's show, we're going to go through the 3 keys to victory for the Houston Cougars against Baylor this weekend. This Baylor game has a lot of emotional ties to it. Both teams are in rough spots. As we said in the crossover episode on Thursday, both coaches may be fighting for their jobs in a weird way in this one. Obviously, the Baylor game holds a particular interest to Houston Cougar fans that remember getting left out of the Big 12 in the 1990s because of the role Ann Richards, a Baylor alum, played in that. Obviously, being from Baylor and the University of Texas at Austin, or having her 2 degrees from those 2 schools, in the formation of the Southwest Conference, or the dissolution of the Southwest Conference, the formation of the Big 12, they left Houston and other city schools, for what it's worth, out to create a school where, or a conference where UT Austin wasn't the biggest city, and the rest of them were a bunch of other schools, including her beloved Baptists. All kinds of fun rivalry things in this one, but we got to make sure we win it to be able to talk trash about those rivalries. And there are 3 things that Houston's got to do. So one of those things is that they got to get after Blake Shapen. We'll talk about more about why that is in a second, because I think that seems fairly obvious at first. They got to find his favorite receiver, Monteray Baldwin, on every single snap. We'll give more detail as to why that is. And then third and finally, they got to make sure that they give Donovan Smith time to take advantage, because there are things to take advantage of in the passing game. So we got all those things to cover. We're going to break that down and more in today's episode. So let's go ahead and start with getting after Blake Shapen. Blake Shapen is not a particularly fleet of foot fellow. Alliteration, this we're doing today on a Friday of all days, right? Fleet of foot fellow. He's not like the athletic scrambly type that gets a ton of yards running the football. He's not like a big game running kind of guy. If anything, he's got negative rushing yards in more games this year than not. So I say to say that, like, he's not going to be running away from the pass rush a whole heck of a lot. But also, when you look at the things that Blake Shapen does, they've had a fairly shrunk down passing offense. I say that to say that he has not been the starter for every game. He missed some time hurt in the middle of the season, but he does have just 6 passing touchdowns. He has thrown 1 interception. He has just thrown 186 passes this season. He's completed 60.8 of them. If he gets time to stay in the pocket, he can throw. He has 1,400 yards in his 5 games as the starter. But I have to say that I think that in watching him move around some in the Iowa State and Texas Tech games, that if, Houston's pass rusher, that's Dot Nwankwo, if Nelson Caesar is healthy this week, and I assume he is, we haven't heard anything otherwise. To this point, at the recording of this podcast, we haven't heard anything otherwise. And Dana acted like after last week's Kansas State game, like it was a fairly minor thing. He wasn't be ready to go last Saturday. So if Nelson Caesar is back, and you have Gwegbu on the other side, Dot in the middle, get some Monaray Caldwell in there, right? The occasional blitzer from beyond that. Like, I think you can get after this guy and get off his marks. He is typically having over 3 seconds to pass, 3.05 seconds to pass the football, which is a lot of time. On non-screen passes, I should say, not because screen passes obviously come out of hands pretty quickly. On non-screen passes, he has 3.05 seconds for the football. And that I think is really important because that means that that's what he's comfortable with. That's what he's averaging. If you can pull that number down, get after him in under 3 seconds, get contacted him, get him off his spots, get him flushed in closer to 2.5 seconds, you may alter a lot of what they're trying to do. He also, for what's worth, tries to get the ball out really quickly because their average distance of target, the ADOT, is just 8.9 yards. And I understand they throw a lot of screen passes, right, which is probably pulling that number down some. But it also means that he's trying to get the ball out his hands, right? And there's some quarterbacks, namely, like you could argue Tom Brady's that kind of a guy to get the ball out of his hands, right? Like I'm not saying that's not a effective strategy, but I am saying that if you can keep that from happening with a great pass rush, you can fluster a lot of what an already offense is trying to do, right? And so if you can get after him, get him off his spots, he's not mobile, get after him once he flushes the pocket. We know Nelson Caesar, if he's healthy and ready to roll, had a great year as a pass rusher. Gwegbu has kind of come on as of late. And then I've always thought of Dot. I mentioned him earlier at the top of the segment. I've always thought of Dot as a run-stopping guy. He is great in one-on-one combat, if I like a better phrase, like all that one-on-one hand-fighting stuff inside. He is continue to develop as a pass rusher this season. As we mentioned in the Kansas State game, actually, I think I said on Twitter, I was too bad a mood after the game to talk about it directly, but he is the first sack on future pro Cooper Beebe from Kansas State since like the year 2020, right? Like Dot has turned into a much better pass rusher over the course of the season. Last year was more of a run guy. This year he's more balanced. He does both things very well. And I think that what you're going to see there is hopefully some aspect of that pass rush feeding it to the other one, right? Either the edge guys like a Caesar and a Caldwell, if they stick to the odd front, flushing him up the middle, flushing him to Dot, or Dot penetrating up the middle, flushing him to the outside, where the Gwegbu and Caesar can kind of come down from the outside linebacker, hang player type spot and come down and get him. I assume in this matchup we'll see more of the 3-3-5 because they stuck with it against Kansas State, frankly, even when it wasn't working particularly well. I think that, again, we mentioned after the Texas game, they went to this because it plays off of the strengths of Gwegbu and Caesar. It just looked particularly porous in the Kansas State game without Caesar out there, right? And so assuming he's back and assuming this thing works well, Houston could really have a chance to actually have a fairly solid defensive game. We haven't had many of those this year, and I understand why you'd be a little skeptical. But if you get after shape and get him off his spots, get him outside of the pocket where he is less effective in the football, get him flustered where he has less time than he's used to throwing the football, and all of those good things for the Houston Cougars, I have to think that things will go Houston's way. Now, if you're a daily morning listener on your way to work, I'm sorry you didn't get this one on Friday morning. And I understand that, like, things happen. I hope you understand that things happen on our end too. We're trying to get this out to you as fast as we can. But you could also be listening to this on your way to a tailgate or on your way to Waco on Friday afternoon or Saturday morning. And if you are on your way to Waco or on your way to a tailgate along that Riverside McLean Stadium or what have you, and you still need tickets, let me tell you where to go get them. There's no better place to go get those tickets than the GameTime app, or use GameTime.co. The GameTime is a great place to go find tickets because the only place that lets you get complete peace of mind within your purchase. You can see your seats view from before you buy them, so you can see exactly what to expect once you walk into the stadium. All prices show the total up front. There's no like hidden fees after you click go on any of these kinds of things. And they want to make sure they find ways to save you money on all types of events, whether that is football games, concerts, basketball, baseball, theater, etc. They find all kinds of things and ways to save you money to all types of events, whether it's a college football game or you're already trying to get spring training tickets because you got a bad taste from last season in your mouth or whatever. All kinds of things are at GameTime.co. Now, you can also, when you do this, go to the zone deals. I think this is the coolest part. You just say what section of the stadium you want to sit in. GameTime picks the seats, and you get an average of 18% savings. That's really, really big time. So make sure you go to GameTime.co or the app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute deals, last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I mentioned that there were 3 keys to the game. We've gone through an effective one, but in the course of mentioning that, I mentioned one receiver that is Blake Shapen's very most favorite, and that is Monteray Baldwin. Monteray Baldwin is really, really good, folks. And so Houston's second key to victory is going to be to make sure they account for him and know where he is on every single snap. Now, if you look at his lineup numbers as far as where he lines up on the field and how many snaps he plays each position, that feels really simple to do, right? In 261 snaps this year, he's only been the outside receiver 20 times. He's typically in the slot. The trick is that he lines up in the left slot, the right slot, the outside slot, the inside slot when they're in trips. He'll line up on a dead T side way outside but in the slot receiver because there's a tight end on that side or whatever, right? They'll motion him, they'll put him in rub routes, they'll put him all kinds of different things from those slot positions. So while he lines up in the slot nearly every pattern, he is typically on the move, sometimes literally again in motion at the snap. He is by far and away the favorite target. Again, we mentioned that Shapen has thrown just 186 passes. There have been over 50 targets of Monteray Baldwin this season. That's a lot, folks. That's a lot. He has 30 catches for 570 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's 19 yards per reception. In an offense that likes to throw the ball short, he takes them deep. It's probably because he's as fast as anyone in college football, and I don't see that to be like over the top praising of someone in the team, but more of the kind of thing that Houston's got to account for. He at one point last season he had the high mark last season because at one point in after catching the football and running with it, he hit over 22 miles per hour with the ball. I believe it was 22.8 miles per hour with the ball in his hands. He's really, really fast. Houston's got to find a way to find where he is. And I have in my notes that they should not bracket him. Bracket is when you have like a guy on his left, a guy on his right, a guy on his inside, a guy on his outside. I don't think after watching him that's as effective because he got such great straight line speed. I think the far more effective way to cover this guy is to have someone low and someone high, right? High-low the guy, make him run side to side to get away from you, and running side to side is not gaining yards, right? That's my thought. And if I look at where he catches the ball the most, 15 of his 52 targets have been roughly little less than a third, have all been in the middle of the field between 10 and 20 yards downfield. So he's looking in that middle window, what we call as I coach the hole, right? He's looking in the hole in the middle of the field. And the nice part about that for Houston is that I'm assuming they match up with him with Malik Fleming and a one-on-one kind of scenario underneath stuff and give a little bit more of a press coverage. Baldwin is not a particularly large guy, right? Malik Fleming, we think about getting boxed out by big tight ends against West Virginia or jump balls. Some went his way, some didn't against Texas, those kinds of things. Kansas State as well, I guess. Baldwin's really, really good, but he's not a giant. He's also 5'9", so Malik Fleming can play press coverage, can play down low on top of him, and be, not be giving anything up. I think it's really, really important for this matchup. And because of how many of their concepts put him in that middle of the field, whole spot, 10 to 20 yards, center of the field, that is where A.J. Halsey can come down from the top side. Now, Halsey is he's a menace. I mean, he's vicious. He lays real-time hits. Frankly, with a smaller receiver, if he caught him good, you could see him, certainly get alligator arms and think about it the rest of the day. I'm not one for advocating for cheap shot hurting guys, but you want to make him feel it and think of if he catches one for 16 yards, make sure he thinks about it the next time he goes the same route, right? I think that's what you could see out there. I also think we saw Halsey play different spots in the Kansas State game because of a couple injuries along the way. You saw Juwan Gaston play from that free safety spot against bigger receivers that would worry me. You have 5'9" and 5'9" against their best guy, but Gaston being 5'9" or 10 or whatever he's officially, because the listings are always a little off, right? Theoretically, you're not giving up much there either. So it's okay to have two of your 5'9" type guys, 5'10" type guys out there covering him because you're not giving up size on those matchups. You just got to find a way to have a guy underneath and a guy over the top. When you have guys on the left and right against a speed guy like this, I think about the most perfect example of this was it been 2 weeks ago now? The Miami Dolphins were playing the Philadelphia Eagles, and I forget if it was Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football, one of the primetime games. Anyway, like they talked about this Tua pass where he hits Tyreek Hill in double coverage and like throwing the ball in a bucket kind of thing. But Tyreek Hill is faster than both guys covering him, and the double coverage, quote unquote, was guy on his inside and guy on his outside. And they had to both open their hips, turn and run in a straight line downfield faster than Tyreek Hill. And they couldn't do it. And it led to a great touchdown. I worry bracketing Monteray Baldwin, well, he's not Tyreek Hill, could lead to the same kind of outcome because he's really, really fast in a straight line. And if your coverage idea is having one guy on the inside and one guy on the outside to theoretically make him only one route, while you will effectively only make him run one route, that's hard to say. It is challenging when he's really, really good at that route. That's the route I think he probably runs the best. It's just the simple seam route, maybe a little bit of a fade act on the start of it. Whatever. Straight line down the field is his best concept. They hit him again in that 15-yard window, and he takes off running. He has multiple catches of over 45 yards this season. I mean, he is fast. You've got to high-low this guy. You got to do it with a couple different I'm sure they'll line up different corners and they give him different looks and things like that. I'm sure Baylor try and move around the field so it's not just Fleming and Halsey high-low on the guy, but Houston's got to find ways to keep him contained. What I imagine that leads to, if they do it really well in the first quarter, by the second quarter or certainly after halftime, you'll see Baylor put him in a lot of rub routes. They do a good job of in man-man rubbing him off of other concepts to where that underneath guy, in our case, I believe it'll be Malik Fleming, is thrown off of the coverage. What has to happen when you do that with a guy as fast as Monteray Baldwin is, it's hopefully they're practicing the verbal communication, but in a rowdy, raucous McLean Stadium, it might be too loud for them to actually hear the verbal. Everyone's got to understand commonly run concepts, so fade spout, and I guess in a rub route kind of way, slant arrow or whatever, right? And doing those kinds of classic combinations, understanding who we would call it unwrap, who unwraps to which guy, right? If our two guys are meeting at the same point and then continuing in what is a rub route, an inadvertent air quote screen, I have to know that, okay, that guy's covering number 2. I've got number 3. We're going to unwrap it. I'm going to take the inside. He's going to take the outside because they do this a lot. This is a commonly run concept, etc. It's a little bit of film study and a little bit of understanding. And frankly, it takes some time in the field to kind of work through the timing of it. And so we talk about like having a secondary coming into the season that had not played much together. You worry about it. By this point, they played a lot of snaps together. You're hoping to have some proficiency in unwrapping those kinds of concepts. Now, they do have another receiver that catches a lot of balls, and Ketron Jackson. He has 51 targets, 24 catches, 392 yards at 16.3 yards per catch, but he has no touchdowns. He is not the same kind of threat by any stretch. And that's not to say that he's not good, although some people might say that. But it is to say that he's not as threatening to me as Monteray Baldwin. I will say that if Houston were to have trouble with him, he's more of the classic 6'3". He might box you out for a jump ball. He's that type of receiver. So that will take a little bit different type of minutia part of the coverage on him. But on the whole, he doesn't concern me nearly as much. Again, that's not to say that he is not a good receiver. It's just not the one that worries me nearly as much. I will say, though, that Houston will have to score points to win this game. They're not going to keep Baylor out of the end zone. It's not going to be a clean sheet. They don't pitch a shutout. And frankly, I'm not going to be the one that gets upset if they give up 14 or 21 points. Both teams practice this. Again, this offense will be at home. Again, they feel like they got to win. They'll be motivated. Houston's got to come in and score the touchdowns. Now, to score the touchdowns, they got to get Donovan Smith some time. We'll talk about why in a second. But first, if you are also trying to win this weekend, just like the Houston Cougars are, you need to head to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege to start winning yourself. Now, as basketball season is here, and every Houston Cougar fan knows that as much as anyone, you can pick combo projections across Prize Picks between football and basketball from their specials league. It's a league specifically created for combination projections. You can do things like LeBron James and Travis Kelce for a 10.5 3-pointers made and receptions combined kind of combination, right? So between the two of them, you're going to have like LeBron hits 4 threes and Travis Kelce has 7 catches. Boom, there's your 11. You're over the 10.5, right? You pick combinations of stats between the two guys. It's a great way to get involved in all kinds of sports on a fun weekend like this one itself. Plus, PrizePicks has this reboot policy. So even if your guys that you put stat picks on get hurt, you can still continue to win. Football and basketball games, if you have a player that exits the game in the first half and does not return the second, that player is automatically rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with that kind of insurance policy. So make sure you go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEG for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, go win this weekend. All right, so I could say every week that an important key is to make sure that you give Donovan Smith time to throw, right? I think that's fairly obvious, fairly simple. And yes, of course, Donovan Smith would like some time to throw. I would also like to win the lottery. Like, some things are just fairly obvious. But in this game specifically, the secondary from Baylor is very, very weak. And it's probably the weakest part of their team. It's probably why they are 3-5 themselves. It's probably why one of their 3 wins is against a school that I did not know had football, named Long Island University. Did you know they played football in Long Island? I did not know they played football in Long Island. Anyway, so getting Donovan Smith time to throw the ball is going to be really important because Houston will have advantages at every single receiver matchup. They have no one that can cover Matthew Golden one-on-one. They have no one that can cover Sam Brown one-on-one. If Joseph Manjack is cleared to play, and he's clear at this point, a game time decision based on the still concussion protocol from his, honestly, we'll call it a dirty hit from Texas and game about 2 weeks ago at this point. If he is on the field, they got no one to cover him. If he is not on the field and Boogie Johnson is, they got no one that can cover him. And frankly, from a linebacker perspective, I don't think they can cover Michael Laughlin, right? Like, they've got a lot of holes in their coverage. I think Houston wins one-on-one matchups at each and every one of those spots. Now, the way to cover or mask bad coverage, is that good English? The way to mask bad coverage is, simply put, to make sure that, bluntly, you get after the quarterback and get him off spots. Kind of, not that Houston has bad coverage, but kind of like we said in the opening segment with Blake Shapen, you would get after and make him uncomfortable. If you get after a quarterback and make Donovan Smith uncomfortable, you could theoretically, you'd hope to, honestly, if you're trying to make him uncomfortable, you're trying to make sure that you get him off his spots because Donovan Smith, unfortunately, in his non-Houston time, is a guy that can turn the ball over some. And if I can throw the ball over some, and it's someone that's turnover prone as Donovan Smith has been in the past, you worry about, like, well, honestly, you worry about, if you're Houston, giving them too many possessions because it takes them a long time to throw. And if it takes them a long time to throw, it takes them a long time to score and a lot of possessions to score. And it takes them a lot of possessions to score. You don't want to be giving them extra possessions. But if you give Donovan Smith time to throw, that's why I'm lumping all these words together. I don't think that there's any man-to-man concept that Baylor runs that they'll be able to cover our guys. And in their zone coverage, because Houston's got such an advantage to wide receivers, I think things like the simple clear-out mesh concept they ran against Texas should pop open very, very quickly. It might not be the home run ball through the air. It might be the kind of thing where they try and force Houston to throw the ball short. But we also said on previous episodes and previous weeks that that's actually something Houston does very well. The interesting thing to me about Baylor is I feel like in looking at their defense, they're the kind of team that every 3 or 4 plays, maybe 5 or 6 plays if you're being conservative, you need to take a shot. And I mean like a touchdown wherever you are in the field kind of shot. They have a crazy high, they're giving up crazy high average distance on target, meaning the ball travels in the air a long ways downfield against these guys. That means guys are open down the field. We have the advantage Houston has, and you see that on film. This could be, for the skill guys, a get-right game almost. I mean, it's that kind of a difference to me. If they have time to throw the football, if guys are in the right headspace, right? You saw Kansas State look like they were shaken early, right? If things are going well, this could be the kind of game where you see Golden gets 2 touchdowns, Sammy gets his touchdown, Carnes gets 1, right? Whatever the case may be, right? I always go to Boogie because I think of Boogie, but Carnes had a really, even amidst an otherwise ugly game against Kansas State, I thought his first start as a college kid was pretty impressive. I look at all these spots across the football field and think that Baylor's going to dial up some sort of a way to get pressure because they can't match up in the back half. That also means if you can hold off that pressure, that they're even more skeleton-like in the back half. So I would imagine you'll see things like that corner concept that we have seen so much this season where Matthew Golden lines up in more of a slot position. Outside of him is Sam Brown. Sam Brown is an underneath, like speed in or a 3-yard in or whatever you want to call that simple short drag route kind of stuff, right? Like just barely off line of scrimmage. And then man jack runs like a 6-yard or an 8-yard and hit the corner. The one we dropped that would have kept the game going against Rice when he caught against Texas. Like they run those kinds of concepts. They run the concept a lot. They run that concept a lot in the red zone. It's one of, I guess it's Birch's, favorites, but I also think Holgorsen likes it. You could certainly see them hit that kind of stuff against these guys because that underneath route by Sam Brown holds interior guys. So they got to cover the breaking in route and puts Matthew Golden in a one-on-one situation typically amongst whoever it is matched up on top of him. Takes away the opportunity for double team. And I don't know that they've got anyone that can cover Matthew Golden one-on-one. Frankly, if they go over the top and get the ball in Sam Brown's hands moving full speed, I don't know if they have anyone that can catch Sam Brown. And so all those things you see happen develop because Donovan Smith has time to catch the snap, take his 3-step drop, even from the shotgun. It still takes 1, 2, 3 typically. Have eyes downfield and let the thing fly. If we don't have those, we got problems. I'd imagine because the way things have gone this year that ends up becoming sack yardage problems, not turnover problems. That's been more of the MO of the offense this year when the pass protection is breaking down. And that's not inherently worse, but what it does mean, it puts Houston behind the sticks, which can compound the issue. I anticipate a high-scoring game this week. I'm saying, and I've said earlier this week, 42-38 Houston. I think it's that kind of high-scoring game. Baylor, they don't have their offense is not scaring me as much as it meaning a lot to them, it being a home game, it being a Big 12 game, those kinds of things working against Houston for them scoring a lot of points. But I think as far as the offense goes, Houston can and should score a whole heck of a lot of points. If you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm a little far off or whatever, tell me in the comments down below. And thank you all so much for making Locked On Cougs your first listen, or you're listening along the way to the tailgate, you're listening on the way to Waco, whatever the case may be. We appreciate talking about the Houston Cougars today. Next week, we got some basketball to get into. We got to talk about the Rockets using some Houston Cougars in their marketing plan for the basketball season upcoming. We got to talk about Louisiana Monroe, and basketball season officially tips off Monday night. All kinds of fun things next week. Hopefully talking about a Victory Monday kind of celebration as well. Whatever happens Saturday will be live at night. Cougars After Dark happens after dark. It'll be Saturday night. Cougars After Dark will air. I think we're looking at 9:30. Again, 9:30 Central Time. So be ready for that as well. Live show. Come in, tell us your comments. We'll talk about Houston, Baylor, the Big 12, whatever else is happening in college football that day. So make sure you subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you know we're live, and get ready for that one. Again, thank you all so much for talking Houston Cougars today. Locked On Cougs, primary Locked On Podcast Network. And that means your team every day. Go Cougs.